أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. I greet you all with the greeting words of peace and paradise. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, which means peace be unto you and the mercy of Allah. And boy, do we need Allah's mercy in this very, very dark and dangerous hour that we have entered into. As always, thankful with much gratitude for tuning in to this broadcast. And as always, I try to make it as short as possible and as succinct as possible. Let us get straight to the subject matter. This was inspired by the loss of two of our believers at Muhammad Mosque number 7. Our dearly beloved brother Franklin Muhammad, known as Alamel, our sister Sumaya Ali, known as also Sister Celeste, formerly known as Sister Celeste, and ironically, they both passed away on the same day, and they both passed away while on the ventilators. As we discussed in the previous installments about the shots, I will say today, COVID. I will name it today, even though they will put that little censorship sticker on the video. However, this is of such high importance and emergency, if you will, that it is worth risking the censorship. These two, like many others passing away on this machine, calls to question the use of this ventilator machine and this process called intubation for the treating of shortness of breath. What I'm going to read to you is an article that was written during the height of the pandemic last year in April of 2020. And it was published in a medical journal, WebMD. And the findings of the use of this machine to treat COVID-19 patients are very alarming. So if you remember last year, here in New York State, Governor Cuomo, then Governor Cuomo, was calling for help in getting more ventilators. And he said something very interesting about these machines during the height of the COVID crisis in March of last year. He said that the average person prior to COVID would only be on a ventilator machine for 4 days. He said during the COVID crisis, the average person was on the ventilator between 11 and 12 days. This is what the Governor Cuomo reported in March of 2020. In April of 2020, this report came out by one Robert Preidt, I want to say. I don't know if that's the proper way to pronounce his name, but it's spelled Preidt. He's a Health Day reporter. So let us read the report after 1 month of the use of these ventilator machines to treat COVID in 2020 and what the results were. Then again, we have to ask, why are they still using these machines to treat COVID patients today? So, the largest analysis of hospitalized U.S. COVID-19 patients to date finds that most did not survive after being placed on mechanical ventilator. The study included the health records of 5,700 COVID-19 patients hospitalized between March 1st and April 4th at facilities overseen by Northwell Health, New York State's largest health system. The study included the health records of 5,700 COVID-19 patients hospitalized between March 1st and April 4th at facilities overseen by Northwell Health, New York State's largest health system. Among the 2,634 patients for whom outcomes were known, the overall death rate was 21%. Now, this is before this use of ventilators. When people were dying from COVID, alone, the death rate was around 21%. But it rose to 88% for those who received mechanical ventilation. The Northwell COVID-19 Research Consortium reported. The new findings provide a crucial early insight into the frontline response to the COVID-19 outbreak in New York, which, by the way, if you don't remember, was called the eye of the storm. Yes. The findings also add fuel to the notion that ventilators may sometimes do more harm than good for patients battling for life with severe COVID-19. So now it discusses how ventilators are supposed to work. So let's read from that. Mechanical ventilators work by pushing air into the lungs of critically ill patients who can no longer breathe well on their own. These patients must be sedated and have a tube stuck into their throat. Recognizing that complications from ventilator use can occur, some intensive care units have started to delay putting a COVID-19 patient on a ventilator until the last possible moment, when it is truly a life or death decision, said Dr. Udit Chadha, an interventional pulmonologist with Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. There had been a tendency earlier on in the crisis for people to put patients on ventilators early, without delay, because patients were deteriorating very quickly, Chadha said. That is something that most of us have stepped away from doing. Now, this is in 2020. We let these patients tolerate a little more hypoxia, oxygen deficiency. We give them more oxygen. We don't intubate them. This intubation is very, very serious, painful, and as you will find out later on in this article, traumatizing. We don't intubate them until they are truly in a respiratory distress, Chadha said. If you do this correctly, if you put somebody on the ventilator when they need to be put on the ventilator and not prematurely, then the ventilator is the only option. So let me just stop and say that this doctor is saying that if there is someone who is watching, basically, the patient and the amount of oxygen that they're receiving and taking the proper care with the ventilating machine, it can work to help the person. However, when you think about the state of the hospitals during the COVID crisis and the state of where it is right now during the spike, was there enough medical staff to give each patient or to monitor each patient on the ventilator machine? The answer is no. In fact, New York State's medical system is so overwhelmed that they are offering free degrees. Yes, you could go to medical school for free in New York City to meet the demand of medical personnel that is needed. So oftentimes you have someone who is not skilled and knowledgeable of the machine overseeing the patient. It's no fault of the person who is, doesn't have knowledge of the machine and doesn't know what they're doing. It's just the chaos of the moment where the medical system is overwhelmed. So let us continue to read about the use of these ventilators and what the outcome was during the first month, so that we could see and have insight into what's happening today. Ventilators are typically used only when patients are extremely ill, so experts believe that between 40% and 50% of patients die after going on ventilation, regardless of the underlying illness. These critically ill patients die because they are so sick. Now, this is a quote from a doctor from Ohio. He has no knowledge of what's going on here in New York City. So he's saying that they're dying because of the COVID. However, the doctors that are working here in this system here in New York City, they're saying that an 88% death rate is especially high. Ventilators do have side effects, the article continues, because the machine is breathing for them. Patients often experience a weakening of their diaphragm and all the other muscles involved with drawing breath, Chatter said. When all these muscles become weaker, it becomes more difficult for you to breathe on your own when you're ready to be liberated from the ventilator. Wow. These patients also are at risk of ventilator-associated acute lung injury. I'm going to say that one more time. These patients also are at risk of ventilator-associated acute lung injury, a condition caused by overinflating the lungs during mechanical ventilation, Cooley said. Doctors have to precisely calculate the amount of air to push into a person's lungs with every mechanical breath, taking into account the fact that a large part of the lung could be full of fluid and incapable of inflation. The amount of volume, quote, you need to deliver would be usually less. So the doctors are saying you should use less oxygen and not the usual amount of oxygen they are using to treat COVID patients that are causing these side effects, which oftentimes, I should say, turn out to be fatal. If the settings are not managed correctly, it can cause an additional trauma to the lungs. And as we stated earlier, with the lack of medical personnel and trained medical personnel for this particular machine, then we can deduce that the settings are not being managed correctly. And thus, so many are dying while on the ventilator. Ventilated patients are at increased risk of infection, and many are at risk of psychological complications. Wow. Chatter said a quarter developed post-traumatic stress disorder, as I was saying, having that tube down their throat, and as many as half might suffer subsequent depression. Now, I'm going to stop right here to tell you of two situations that I have personally witnessed. Our elder brother, Abdel Usman, was in a car accident. May Allah be pleased with him. And because he was in a car accident, they had chose to put him on a ventilator machine, and they chose intubation, where they put the tube so far down your throat that you can't talk without choking on it. So when I went to visit him, I called out to him. I said, Usman, Usman. And his eyes came open. And he tried to talk, but the tube was down his throat. So I'm watching my elder suffer through this. And when he tried to talk, the machine went off and started beeping because it detects activity of the person. And when the person is active, the machine automatically beeps and sends a dose of what I call dope, which is the sleeping medication, to put him back into a medically induced coma. So he could have very well been trying to tell us, look, get me off this thing. Now, I'm not a relative of his, so I didn't have the power to say, take him off. Now, my brother, on the other hand, after Abdel Usman, about a year or two after that, I have an older brother. He was in an accident with a bus. And they chose also to put him on a ventilator machine and intubate him. You know why? I don't know. But they claim he had trouble breathing. So when I went to visit my brother one day, I called out to him. And not only did he try to talk, his eyes came open, he was trying to pull the tube out of his throat. And he was obviously saying, get this thing, out of my throat. So I immediately went to the doctor. And I said to the doctor, look, if my brother is able to sit up and has the strength to pull this tube, to try to pull this tube out of his throat, obviously he doesn't have a problem breathing on his own. Obviously, if he has the strength to do that. I said, take my brother off of this, ventilation. Take that tube out of his throat. And it was this young doctor, white doctor, and he was like, well, I still think he needs to be on there. I was like, look, take my brother off of this intubation. And I was very stern with him. I was very clear. And he was like, well, we'll give it some more time. I was like, look, he doesn't need no more time on this. He's obviously suffering. So the next day I went back, alhamdulillah, and they took him off. He's still alive. He's still alive. Now, had he stayed on being intubated and on that ventilator, would he still be alive? Well, according to these figures in this article, and the side effects, probably not. Let's continue reading. It's not a benign thing, Chatter said. There are a lot of side effects. And the longer, pay attention to this, the longer they are on a ventilator, the more likely these complications are to happen. The longer. So as I said earlier, Governor Cuomo mentioned that usually a person's on a ventilator for 4 days. They keep COVID patients on a ventilator from 11 to 12 days. Our brother Abdul Hafiz, may Allah be pleased with him, was on a ventilator for 10 days before he returned to Allah. The longer they are on a ventilator, the more likely these complications are to happen. Besides the statistics on ventilated patients, the New York study also pointed to several factors that contribute to more severe illnesses in COVID-19 patients. Now listen to this. Gender seemed to matter. Most of the patients were male. Wow. This sounds like Pharaoh. Kill the male, spare the female. I was just informed of 2 situations. In fact, Brother Franklin and his wife went to the hospital. They sent his wife home, and they kept Brother Franklin. And Brother Franklin never made it out the hospital. And we heard of another case like that in Jersey, from what I understand, that the husband and wife both caught COVID. The wife was allowed to stay home and nurse herself back to health, and the husband passed away at the hospital. Very interesting. The death rate was higher for males than females. The researchers also found that high blood pressure, obesity, and diabetes were the most common types of coexisting health problems in COVID-19 patients. Patients with diabetes were more likely to receive invasive mechanical ventilation, receive treatment in the ICU, or develop acute kidney disease, the findings showed. So that right there tells us, in this day and time, bad health, bad eating habits, poor diet can cost us our life. Because if you catch COVID and you have these conditions already, the chances of your survival are very small, especially if they put you on this mechanical ventilation. When initially assessed, about 1/3 of patients had a fever, nearly 1,000 had a high respiratory rate, and almost 1,600 received supplemental oxygen. On average, patients were discharged after 4 days, on average. The study, published online April 22nd in the Journal of the American Medical Association, was conducted by the Northwell Health COVID-19 Research Consortium, for those who want to look up this article. So, going back to a personal situation, I was, in 2018, hospitalized with shortness of breath from pneumonia. Praise be to Allah, I didn't have any other underlying conditions that justified putting me on ventilation, or for whatever reason, I was not put on ventilation. I took some antibiotics, and my shortness of breath was very bad. I had a problem walking down a block. Like, clearing one block was extremely difficult for me. That's how bad my shortness of breath was. But with the help of antibiotics, my brother, praise be to Allah, brought me some bean soup, and, drank some raw milk. And above all, I attribute everything to my salat, because no matter what my condition was, I still made my salat 5 times a day. Prayer is very powerful. And with the help of Allah, I was able to regain my health. And within a short time, I was able to leave the hospital and not only walk a block, I walked many blocks. I think the first day I walked a mile. And that same week, by Allah's grace, I walked from Manhattan all the way to Brooklyn, a 13-mile trek. All praises due to Allah. That was at the speed of which I recovered without any mechanical ventilation. So we have to really question these COVID numbers. I cannot truthfully say that Brother Franklin or Sister Celeste passed away from COVID. I can't truthfully say that after reading this report. The ventilator is to the virus what chemotherapy is to cancer. Oftentimes, our relatives die from the effects of chemotherapy, but we will say, oh, they passed away from cancer. Our sister went into the hospital originally to get treated for cancer. Our sister Celeste, may Allah be pleased with her. And her cancer was in remission. So with the help of Allah, she beat the cancer and caught COVID while in the hospital. This is what was reported to me. She caught COVID while in the hospital. And they talked her into getting on the ventilator machine. And that is where she passed away. So Allah knows best the intention of the medical staff. I'm not going to say everybody in the medical field is out to harm people. I definitely won't say that. To all the people of goodwill in the medical field, we are thankful to Allah that you are there, no matter what race you are. I'm grateful for the treatment I received when I went into the hospital, so I'm not going to blanketly indict everyone in the medical field. However, we do know that there are those who go into every field of endeavor, whether it's the medical field, the justice system, with the intent to practice their racism in whatever field they get into. So we cannot discount this and just say, oh, this no longer exists because this book came out and it was exposed in this documentary or whatever, that people still don't go into the medical field with the intent to practice their racism against the black male in particular and against black people in general. So this has to be looked at. So when we look at these numbers of people who are not fully vaccinated passing away, the same way they like to discount whether people passed away from the vaccination or not, or we're not sure, it could have been other conditions that caused them to die, but they just happened to die after they took the vaccine. So we have to question now, if they died on that ventilator, did they really die from COVID? Or did they die from the side effects of ventilation? So may Allah protect us in this very, very dark and dangerous hour. Please, I can't stress it enough. Let us all do our best, keep up our prayers first and foremost, do our best to look after our health. And, whatever happens after that, after we do our part, it is indeed the will of Allah. No one comes to birth on this earth or dies except by the will of Allah. However, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, in every death, there's a lesson to be learned. So let us learn from these lessons. If we have the power to take our relatives off that ventilation machine, if you know of your relative being on that machine, make sure they are not over-ventilated. They may need some oxygen, but make sure they don't give them too much oxygen where they damage their lungs permanently, because you can't live without your lungs. And let us just keep a watchful eye on any of our beloved loved ones when they go into the hospital. Question every pill that they give them. Do research. What are you giving my mother? What are you giving my father? What are you giving my son? What is this? What are you putting inside of them? You have to be vigilant and watch them and stay on top of them, as I did for my brother. And we have to do this for our family members so that they don't pass away because some unskilled worker or some racist worker even. But most of the times, a lot of times, it's because of, I can't say, but lack of competency also plays a part. So let us do our part. I hope this talk was beneficial to you. May Allah continue to bless us and protect us in this hour. Yo Allah dandu'in. Assalamu alaikum.